You're listening to Trek FM.
Hello and welcome to From There to Here, Trek FM's 50th anniversary rewatch of Star Trek, in which we look at all 729 episodes from beginning to end. I'm Mike from Stage 9, and today I'm joined by Davis from the Fandom Podcast Network. How's it going, Davis?
Wonderful. How about you, sir?
I'm doing okay, because today we're going to be talking about a couple of pretty cool episodes of Star Trek, Hunters and Far Beyond the Stars. So, let's get started with Hunters, which is a Voyager episode. In the last episode, they found their little communications relay to the Alpha Quadrant, and here they find that the Alpha Quadrant is sending a message back. In particular, they're sending a mailbag full of personal letters from various family members and friends back home for the crew of Voyager, as well as a coded message which has something or other attached to it. But there is a evil race of aliens out there called the Herosian who are not too happy about Voyager using their relay, so they got to watch out for those guys. So what did you think about Hunters?
I thought it was a really great episode. As we talked about in the previous podcast, that Voyager didn't have a lot of continuity, but this time it does. For 2 episodes right in a row, you actually see you see the Herosian, and then we actually are pretty much introduced to him, which to me they look kind of as if they were a cross between Predator and the Klingons. So they're a warlike species for sure, and I thought it was great being able to have that finally that contact with Starfleet to be able to send those messages. And, you know, it was interesting little tidbits. I don't know if you heard that Seven actually says the Borg encountered something of this species before, but we did nothing about it.
Yeah. It is interesting, you know, I mean, like, the title is Hunters, and, like, as I was watching the episode, I was like, did I put on the wrong episode? Because I'm not seeing any. I mean, they really don't bring them in until like the very end. It's really more about the letters which they're receiving, and it's kind of like a nice character episode. I think that's really cool, and it is sort of interesting to see how well, the lives of the people back home, but also, you know, more importantly, the lives of people on Voyager are changing because of the information that they're receiving from the Alpha Quadrant. I mean, the big one, of course, is the fact that the Maquis have all been wiped out, essentially, which is really interesting. I don't think they even talk about that on Deep Space Nine, do they?
The last time we talked about was with Eddington.
Right.
And I know most of them either were killed or actually put in prisons, but I think the Dominion just wiped them all out.
Right. And here, I mean, there's another case of, you know, seeing how the two shows kind of converge in a sense. You know, it's interesting to, I mean, I'm always sort of like fascinated by this idea of like people getting information which everyone else knows, like, which is all common knowledge, like people getting that information all in sort of like one big like info dump or whatever, and how they process something which the world, you know, or the galaxy in this case, has had, you know, a long time to process. I mean, like, let's say someone is, you know, I mean, the cliche, like someone's in a coma and then they wake up, you know, that kind of thing. Like if someone were, let's say, lost at sea for, you know, 5 years or whatever, and they come back and they find out about, you know, something like, say, 9/11, you know, I mean, that's just like, that's going to blow your mind, you know, it's going to like completely change your view of the world. And for B'Elanna, in particular, it seems like, the idea, you find out, you leave and you're on your way back, and when you left, the world was one way, and you're coming back to something completely different. And here, like on Deep Space Nine, we keep on hearing, obviously, about the Dominion War and all this stuff, but Voyager has no context for that. I was trying to remember if they had encountered the Dominion yet by the time Voyager had left. I don't remember whether or not they did. It was right around that time. There's the episode where Quark is trying to make a deal with those guys with the red and white faces or whatever they had. Yeah. But I can't remember. But certainly there was no war going on yet, and that kind of thing. And to find out oh yeah, the Federation is at war with these people from the Gamma Quadrant. It's like, whoa, that's big news, That's freaky for the crew to find out. And if we were going about this, one series at a time, I think we would kind of lose the impact that has, because we just saw, a 6-part arc on Deep Space Nine where we are, at war with this other entity, and now you see how it's affecting the crew of Voyager, 60,000 light years away. So I think that's cool. But I also like that they took the time to sort of deal with this stuff instead of, trying to shoehorn an outside plot into it just for the sake of action adventure, which I guess they kind of do at the end. But I feel like they're also building to something which is greater than just a throwaway action beat in this episode.
Yeah, I think this episode would have been better if it was a 2-parter.
You think so? Yeah.
Yeah, because you would have had more time to lay out everything, see the letters, and then actually see the Hirogen actually in work. So it could have been A plot was getting all the letters, and then B plot we actually see the introduction of the Hirogen, because the station itself was over 100,000 years old, the whole relay system. Mm-hmm. And so what happens to them, even you hear some of the Hirogen talking, going, I'm going to be, the top of my game, and I'll be impressed, and the ladies will be impressed by me, which we never see any Hirogen female, unless I'm mistaken.
I can't remember any, but...
I don't remember either. But, I mean, on a happier note, Tuvok is a grandfather. So
yeah, and that was a nice little moment where, he's like, I don't care about that. I'll get to that later. I'm Vulcan. And then as soon as Neelix leaves, he's like, "Let me take a look at that thing. Let me take a look at that note."
Absolutely. And I do love the fact that Neelix, I think it was a small B plot in here or it could have been from the other one, about the jalapenos.
Oh yeah. I think that was from
Message in a
the
Bottle.
Last episode.
Yeah,
because he's like, I need to learn, human cuisine or whatever. Yeah. You talk about how this would have worked better as a 2-parter. I always get confused because there's hunters, and then the very next episode is prey, right? But is it supposed to be? I mean, do you think they were trying to mirror that? I know that the next episode does have Hirogen in it. I'm assuming that probably they were not that it is a 2-parter by any stretch of the imagination, but just the idea that they're ooh, hunters. Oh, and then the next one is prey. I think they were just being cute with that, right? I don't know.
Well, yeah, and maybe they were thinking, hey, we could actually tie in some of these episodes together and make it look, more continuity wise. So
yeah.
I think it works pretty well. I mean, I enjoyed the episode. I think it could have been a little bit better in some ways, but overall, I mean, it had a happy ending to it. So
yeah. No, it's a good episode for sure. And I mean, I really do think that season 4 of Voyager is where it really starts picking up and getting really good. And I think that we're seeing that here. And I'm excited to see what comes next for sure. All right, well, should we move on to Deep Space Nine?
Indeed, let's move on.
Far Beyond the Stars. This is the episode where Cisco has an encounter with an orb, and he's taken back to the 20th century, where he is a writer, a sci-fi writer named Benny Russell, who is writing a story about a space station in the future, and the story that he's writing is Deep Space Nine, and the episode deals a lot with what the climate was like in the 50s for black writers in particular, and it deals with a lot of issues in terms of civil rights and social justice and all that stuff. And it's considered by many, I think, to be the best episode of Deep Space Nine. There's kind of like I think like a three-way tie between this, Trials and Tribulations, and In the Pale Moonlight. But I guess let me ask you this to start: do you think this is the best episode of Deep Space Nine?
If it's not the best, it's one of the best. I know it's one of my favorites for sure. Just because the opening scene, you have Cisco finding out that one of his friends from the academy, his ship was destroyed. And in a lot of ways, I'm wondering if Cisco at this point in the game is suffering from PTSD.
Yeah, he probably is, right?
And he's contemplating life in general. What's it worth it? Is this whole thing worth doing? Should someone else be making that decision, the hard decisions, instead of me? And I think that the prophets saw that, and they said, we want to show you it is worth it. And he has to go through this. And I love how Joseph Sisko is the emissary to the prophets in his vision, so to speak. And if you look how just the whole climate of the 1950s, I mean, it was hard for me to watch in the 90s. And it was hard for me to watch again, just knowing about what's going on with today's world and everything. And that's why I love Avery Brooks so much, because at that one point before he starts breaking down, he just says, I am a human being, and you cannot destroy my ideas. I mean, it was just so powerful that I thought that, if anything, it helped him realize, saying that I am worth being this. I am worth being the captain. I'm worth being the main man, so to speak, of this battle.
Yeah, it is. With everything going on today, I mean, these episodes and a lot of Deep Space Nine, seems even more relevant than it did, back when it first aired, and this episode in particular certainly does, which is sad and terrifying that that's the case. But it definitely is, and this episode I think is so good because not only does it deal with these, really, really important issues in, kind of like a sci-fi context, and one which is, very, very well done on its own. I mean, this episode was written or co-written by Mark Scott Zicree, who is like the Larry Nemeczek of the Twilight Zone, and you can kind of tell because it feels like a Twilight Zone episode. And yet, in addition to all of that stuff, and which is obviously the backbone of the episode, and I think the reason why people really, love it, to not just abandon this character after this episode, to actually take the character of Benny Russell and expand on it in like new and crazy ways that you would never expect, I think just speaks to Deep Space Nine's like quality on a much larger scale. It can tell a standalone story like this, and I mean, you could watch this episode without having seen any other Star Trek, really, and it would be just as effective as it is here. But then to say, like, is Benny Russell real? Is this actually going on? Are the two things like coexisting, and everything, and asking these much larger philosophical questions, I think is just amazing. It's fascinating.
Oh, absolutely. And if you even think about it, the whole story, both sides, the Deep Space Nine and the Benny Russell side, mirror each other so completely. Jake Sisko is his friend in the Benny Russell, and he is killed by the police, who are Gul Dukat and Wayun. And he was killed by the Dominion. His friend was killed by the Dominion. His friend is killed right here. Joseph Sisko, who is the Reverend, who is the emissary of the prophets in the Benny Russell. And then at the very end, he quotes 2 Timothy 4:7, and Sisko looks at him and says, "I never know you to quote from the Bible." He goes, "You'll find I'm full of surprises." Mm-hmm. So, I mean, so much is just intertwined, which makes this such an amazing episode.
Yeah, yeah. I guess I probably would not say that this is the best episode of Deep Space Nine, but I would put it in the top 10 for sure, probably top 5.
Which one's your favorite?
I think I have to go with In the Pale Moonlight. I mean, Trials and Tribulations is great fun and everything like that, but if we're going to be hardcore serious about it, In the Pale Moonlight, I think, has to be number 1 for me.
Yeah, I have to say that is probably one of my favorites, if not my favorite, just because it's an amazing episode. I mean, just the whole time Sisko is talking, then he just like looks at the camera and says everything. You're just going, wow.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, it's so good. Yeah, and you know, I don't know. I've always liked Far Beyond the Stars, but you know, when I first was watching sort of like the initial return of Benny Russell, you know, later on in the series and everything, it always kind of bothered me because I couldn't wrap my head around it. But I've definitely come to terms with it over the years, and now I find it to be really, really interesting. And if anyone is sort of interested in hearing sort of a further discussion of Benny Russell on the whole and his place in the Star Trek universe, there's an episode that we did on Commentary Trek Stars, number 86, where we look at the idea. For those people who don't know, Commentary Trek Stars is a show about the creators of Star Trek, and we basically tackled an episode where we looked at Benny Russell as a creator of Star Trek, maybe an in-universe creator of Star Trek. I'm not sure, but yeah, check it out. It's me, my co-host Max, and Chris Jones, all of us on there. It's episode number 86 of Commentary Trek Stars, and yeah, check it out for sure. It's a good discussion, if I do say so myself. All right, well, Davis, thank you for joining me for this block. It's been a lot of fun.
Indeed, it has.
Where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter at Davis Grayson, or on Facebook with the same name of Davis Grayson. And you can also find me in the Babel Conference, where I pop up from time to time. And you can also find me on the Phantom Podcast Network, where we talk about all things geekery, so to speak, culture class, Highlander, Blood of Kings, and we also have the Couch Potato Theater, where we talk about some very fun movies, and we have some fun movies lined up for the rest of this year.
As always, you can find me right here on Trek FM doing Stage 9, and you can also find me on Twitter at Mumbles3K. And we won't be back tomorrow, but Amy and Lee will, to talk about 2 more episodes of Star Trek, Prey and One Little Ship.